Dr. Nkechi Taifa is a civil and human rights attorney, scholar, activist, talk show host, and author. She is president of the Taifa Group, LLC, and serves as a senior fellow for the Center of Justice at Columbia University and as a Power, Innovation, and Leadership graduate of Harvard Kennedy School. A visionary thought leader and a nationally recognized expert and commentator on race and justice issues. Taifa is convener emeritus of the Justice Roundtable Coalition and served as a commissioner and chair of the DC Commission on Human Rights. She has worked for the Open Society Foundation, Howard University School of Law, the ACLU, Women's Legal Defense Fund, National Prison Project, and as an attorney in private practice. She has testified before the United States Congress, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, the U.S. Helsinki Commission, the D.C. Council, the Maryland Legislature, and the California Reparations Task Force. And Nkechi is founder and executive director of the Reparations Education Project, Inc. And she is also an inaugural commissioner of the National African American Reparations Commission and a founder of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. She delivered a powerful, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you watch her TED Talk on reparation, an issue whose time has come. A native Washingtonian, a powerful book author, her bestseller memoir, Black Power, Black Lawyer, My Audacious Quest for Justice, and the author of several children's books. I'm going to stop there, but if you want more information, www.nkechitaifa.com. Try and get that in the chat. Sister, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us this evening.
Dr. Lois Rosado and members of the Greenbelt Reparations Commission, thank you so very much. I'm very honored to join you today in presenting just a little bit of the history of the reparations movement in this country. Permit me to share my screen, and let me just take a moment to deal with the techie tech. Can you tell me if you see it on the screen yet? Yes?
Yes,
I think I see Megan shouting, nodding. Nodding, yes. Hold on one second. Okay, let's just go right here at the beginning and let me just delete this. Okay, great. So this is our Reparations 101 briefing produced by the Reparation Education Project, which, as Dr. Rosado said, is a nonprofit that I founded and direct. Okay, let's see. Okay, I just have to trying to see how the advance goes. Hold on, it went too far. Okay, here we go. Okay, we're good. Great. So many people ask, well, Nkechi, just what are reparations? In essence, reparations are forms of redress provided to those who have suffered human rights abuses or other forms of widespread systemic injustices, or to their descendants, usually in the aftermath of war, enslavement, or other forms of gross injustice. Now, there are many different definitions out there with respect to reparations, and one which I came up with several decades ago, I'm going to share. So I also say that reparations, when you specifically identify it with Black people in this country, includes the formal acknowledgement that there was a historic harm and a formal unfettered apology. And why do I emphasize unfettered? Because there was an apology issued by the Senate in 2009 but it expressly included a disclaimer that its apology could not be used to support any claim for reparations. So I say the formal acknowledgement of harm and a formal unfettered apology. Number two, the recognition that the injury has continued past the enslavement era and still manifests today. Now, this statement is critical to offset the argument that the enslavement era was too long ago. It is why we early on came up with the concept of promoting the continuing vestiges or the living legacies of the enslavement era. There's something in the law that says a continuing violation. And when that violation is shown to continue, then the original harm is nevertheless actionable, no matter how much time has passed. Number three, the commitment to redress by culpable parties, including the federal government, which sanctioned the enslavement and subsequent Jim Crow apartheid system known as segregation, and by state and local governments, industries and corporate institutions, academic and religious entities, private estates, and other culpable parties which enjoyed unjust enrichment from the era. And then number four, the actual redress in whatever form or forms are agreed upon. And we say are agreed upon because reparations is not something that the culpable party, the guilty party decides in a vacuum. They say, okay, well, we have done harm. We're going to apologize. And this is going to be your reparations. Here's a scholarship. Here's the name on a building. No, it must be something that is agreed upon by the injured parties as well. And then moreover, since the time of my drafting of that particular definition, the international community has come up with some norms. And so those norms include, number one, cessation and guarantees of non-repetition, i.e., it is critical that the harms and the injuries cease, they desist, and not be repeated, that mechanisms be put in place to ensure their non-repetition. Restitution, reestablishing the situation that existed before the wrongful act was committed. Number three, compensation, appropriate and proportional to the gravity of the violation. Number four, satisfaction, apology, repair to emotional injury, mental suffering, injury to reputation, and rehabilitation, legal, medical, psychological, and other care and services. So I want to take just a little bit more time on this particular slide because I just want to make it clear that reparations did not just pop up in the 21st century, okay? It didn't just pop up in 2020 with the murder of George Floyd or with the 2020 candidates. Reparations has been a long-standing principle of law here. And there has never been a time when Black people was not advocating for it. Two of the first formal records of petitions for reparations that were pursued and won came from formerly enslaved Black women, Belinda Sutton Royal and Henrietta Wood, who successfully sued their former enslavers' estates that they essentially were significant in helping to build, Belinda in Massachusetts and Henrietta in Kentucky. Now, Belinda's story is one of the earliest acts of an enslaved person in the United States recovering any type of reparation for the harm done to their lives. She was stolen and kidnapped from Africa at 12 years old. She was enslaved by the wealthy Royal family in Boston. She gained her freedom after 50 years of enslavement, submitting numerous petitions, beginning in 1783 to the Massachusetts General Court, asking for a pension for herself and her daughter. The court ultimately ruled in her favor, granting 15 pounds and 12 shillings a year. However, she never received the full payment that she was promised. But the story goes much further. In his will, The former enslaver, Isaac Royale, bequeathed nearly 1,000 acres of the land Belinda and countless unnamed others tilled while they were enslaved, willed it to Harvard University, upon which was ultimately used to build the prestigious Harvard Law School. So you see the direct connection from the past to the present and even going on into the future. And as you see in the slide, this Belinda's petition, that was a book written by author Raymond Wimbush, one of the first that started talking about the case of Belinda and her petitions. We know about it because it's court records. Think about the countless others where there is no court record, there is no documentation, but that does not make the injury any less. As for Henrietta Wood, in 1870, she sued for reparations. She won a $2,500 verdict, the largest to date of any kind. Her story is recorded also in court filings. She was born into slavery in Kentucky. She had been granted her freedom in Ohio in 1848, but 5 years later, she was kidnapped by Zebulon Ward, who sold her. She ended up enslaved on a Texas plantation until after the Civil War, even after the Texas Juneteenth revelation. Although she asked for $20,000 in her lawsuit, she was awarded a fraction, $2,500, worth about $65,000 today. But still, believe it or not, still the largest known sum granted by a United States court as restitution for enslavement. Now look at that in relation to her former kidnapper and enslaver who she sued, who left an estate worth at least $600,000 when he died in 1894, a multimillionaire in today's terms. And Henrietta Wood's story is documented in the book by Caleb McDaniel, Sweet Taste of Liberty, A True Story of Slavery and Restitution in America. I just really need you to really understand that this really wasn't that long ago, because Henrietta Wood's son died in 1951. Okay, 1951. That was several years before I was born. So, I mean, we're not talking about ancient history here. Okay, so now 40 acres and a mule, where did that come from? The origin of that phrase dates to the January 1865 Special Field Order number 15 issued by Union General William T. Sherman. The order gave 400,000 acres of land in 40-acre segments to 40,000 Black people. This repertory idea was presented to him by 20 Black leaders, primarily Baptist and Methodist ministers of the Savannah, Georgia Black community led by 67-year-old Garrison Frazier. Indeed, this was the first time that a representative of the United States government asked leaders of the Black masses what they wanted. The response, overwhelmingly, was land upon which they could build and live amongst themselves as opposed to being scattered amongst the whites. However, by and large, the order for land did not come to fruition. President Andrew Johnson overturned Sherman's Special Order, Field Order number 15, after the assassination of President Lincoln, returned the land to Southern white former enslavers. Yet another example of reparations being paid to the agents of oppression rather than its victims. 1896, Callie House and Isaiah Dickerson spearheaded the first mass-based reparations movement in the United States, the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Association, whose mission was to organize mutual aid for its members and to pass federal pension legislation that will compensate formerly enslaved persons. They organized in Black churches. They collected names of formerly enslaved persons and their former enslavers to send to Congress and set up organizational chapters to support collective work and economics through the unification of newly freed Blacks across the South. Federal agencies, however, specifically the Bureau of Pensions, the Department of Justice, and the Post Office, obstructed these efforts by saying the organization was committing fraud and leading Blacks to believe that they could ever receive recompense from the federal government. That was the fraud. Believing that they could receive justice. As such, Kelly House was wrongfully convicted of mail fraud by an all-white male jury, sentenced and imprisoned for a year and a day for her grassroots organizing work. She went to prison. On the heels of Kelly House and Isaiah Dickinson's movement was Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association during the early part of the 20th century, which also galvanized thousands of supporters. A Garvey follower born in 1898 in Louisiana and later to be known as Queen Mother Audley Moore, championed the cause of reparations throughout the 20th century, perhaps being the most vocal Black nationalist and Pan-Africanist advocate for reparations during the 1950s and 60s. She inspired people in both the civil rights and Black Power movements, including Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, James Foreman, the Black Panther Party, the Martin Luther King, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, and more. And Queen Mother Audley Moore was active in every major reparations movement until she became an ancestor in 1997 at the age of 97, 1996 or 97, I forget just which year she passed. And today she is heralded as the modern era, the mother of the modern era reparations movement. So we've all heard the story that civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King used the analogy of coming to Washington to cash a check which unfortunately came back marked insufficient funds. You see, the civil rights movement knew about restitution, knew about reparatory justice. Some of us may know that James Foreman of SNCC, I don't know if my cursor can be shown right here, Student Nonviolent Labor National Coordinating Committee, interrupted Sunday service at Riverside Church in New York to demand that churches and synagogues pay reparations. I think that was 1967 or 68. And some, in fact, did put money into a fund. The Black Panther Party, we're talking about the Black Power movement now. The Black Panther Party listed the issue of payback as point 3 of its 10-point program. In 1968, Brother President Imari Obadeli of the Republic of New Africa stated in their Declaration of Independence, quote, "We claim no rights from the United States other than those rights belonging to oppressed people anywhere in the world. And these include the right to damages, to reparations." And it was these civil rights and Black Power movements that inspired the Japanese Americans to unify their efforts, resulting in them being granted reparations for unjust incarceration during World War II. Indeed, a stalwart from the Japanese American community, activist Yuri Kochiyama, was a close confidant of Malcolm X, was present in the Audubon Ballroom where he was associated, and later worked again with many, many organizations. Congressman Mervyn Dimely of California worked tirelessly with the Japanese American community, resulting in the 1988 passage of the Civil Liberties Act, which granted them reparations. Their award, $20,000 to each Japanese American detention camp survivor, a trust fund to be used to educate Americans about their sufferings, a formal apology from the United States government, and a pardon to all those who resisted detention camp internment. And you see the signing of the Japanese reparations bill, the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 by President Reagan there. But I illuminated the clause in the Japanese bill, a pardon for all those resisting detention camp internment because of the plight of what we call Black political prisoners in the United States, many from the Black Power era and the Federal Bureau of Investigation Injustices against the Black movement, many of whom languished and are still languishing in prison. So that's brings us to what I call the modern era of reparations activism, with the 1987 founding of NCOBRA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, brought into existence from those who were part of Black Power movements, who intentionally felt that it was time to move the issue from the revolutionary fringes into the mainstream. And this founding came around the same time as the discussions and debates were going on in Congress around the Japanese American reparations bill. And I say we because I was at that founding conference, having worked on reparations several decades even before that. But we looked around and we saw the precedent of the Civil Liberties Act granting reparations to Japanese Americans, and it really was smacking our face. If Congress could pass reparations legislation for Japanese Americans, it would be sheer racism for them to deny it to African Americans. So we worked closely with Congressman John Conyers in formulating what would later be introduced as H.R. 40, a federal reparations study bill following the exact route that Japanese Americans follow. First, a bill introduced in Congress to study the issue and make recommendations, and then the bill to actually put the recommendations into law. So the Commission to Study Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act, first introduced in 1988, continues today under the leadership of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. And in 2014, we saw the publication of Ta-Nehisi Coates' article in the Atlantic magazine, The Case for Reparations, which galvanized a whole new generation to the issue of reparations. And when Ta-Nehisi interviewed me for that article, despite the fact that we had lengthy interviews, what he put in the article rang true. The quote he put was that H.R. 40 was not asking for one red cent from anyone. It was simply a bill to study the issue, okay? And despite that, the bill has still languished in Congress for over 30 years. In 2015, we saw the formation of NARC, the National African American Reparations Commission, and we saw the proliferation of lawsuits, corporate lawsuits, demanding justice from those entities, whether they were banks or other entities that were primarily led by a colleague, DeAndrea Farmer Pellman. And we saw the formation of REP, the Reparation Education Project, a new organization with historic roots in the modern era of reparations. And I say historic roots because, as you see here, if you can see my cursor, is a picture of Queen Mother Audley Moore at an NCOBRA convention. She has an NCOBRA t-shirt on. There is me, myself, holding my baby girl, you know, at the time. So it is generational. Queen Mother Moore's generation, my generation, and now my daughter's generation, who actually is now almost 30 years old herself. So we also have a bill that's been introduced in the Senate. Senator Cory Booker, introduced a Senate companion bill to H.R. 40. Also, we're talking about post-2020 now. Land stolen from Bruce's Beach in California is returned to the descendants and reparations paid. It's revealed that Georgetown University stands today because of the enslaved people that were sold to keep the school financially stable. The city of Evanston, Illinois, used a reparations model to rectify housing redlining discrimination. The state of California established the first statewide reparations task force and held historic hearings. We have corporate entities such as Amalgamated Bank coming on board with respect to calling for reparations. Even Ben & Jerry's ice cream has issued a call to other corporations to engage and talk and support reparations. And they have this little thing out there called "It's Time to Talk About Reparations." So academic, religious, descendant advocacy initiatives, corporate challenges, state and local entities establishing commissions and task forces. Essentially, reparations is on fire, spreading across the country really like wildfire. The California Task Force has not only issued its interim report, which was over 500 pages, but its final report as well, nearly 1,000 pages, covering so many aspects of harm, of injury, not just in California, but nationwide as well. So, as so often in history, where there is advancement, there is backlash. Where there's forward movement, there's backward movement, there's retrenchment. So in 2020, we saw the backlash from the Trump era. We saw Black books being banned. We saw the murder of George Floyd. There were demonstrations everywhere. 2020 candidates for the Democratic presidential nomination were vocal on the issue of reparations. We saw a whole slew of new organizations dedicated to reparations emerge, and we saw interest from philanthropy. I have down here Reparations Now toolkit. Young people, this has passed on intergenerationally now. They have an excellent toolkit, M4BL, Movement for Black Lives. I helped to provide input to that. But really, it was a young folk that did that and carried it forward. But what they did was what they were supposed to do. They sat down and talked with the elders. So just in a nutshell, in those early years, 1700 to the 1800s, we had Belinda's petition, Henrietta Wood, Sherman's Field Order number 15. 1897 to 1924, we had Callie House and the National Ex-Slave Mutual Bounty and Pension Association, Marcus Garvey. 1925, 1965, Queen Mother Audley Moore. Actually, she's extended all the way through to her death. But 66 to 86, basically civil rights movement, Black Power movement. 1987, 2015, in COBRA, National Coalition of Blacks Reparations in America, HR 40 introduction, a World Conference Against Racism in Durban, South Africa, which essentially it's stated that the international slave trade was a crime against humanity and always should have been seen as such. We had the HR 40 introduction by Congressman John Conyers, and we had the proliferation of corporate lawsuits under the aegis of Attorney Deidre Foreman Merpayment. 2016, we have the emergence of the National African American Reparations Commission, and 2020, George Floyd era, proliferation new organizations, Evanston, California, academic religious institutions exploring reparations, an unprecedented number of HR 40 co-sponsors under the aegis of Sheila Jackson Lee, and the introduction in the Senate of a Senate bill by Senator Cory Booker. And as you know from your own mobilization there in Greenbelt, Maryland, all across the country, from Asheville, North Carolina, Amherst, Massachusetts, the list goes, Detroit, Michigan. I mean, just kind of all over the country, we have seen and are seeing the growth and development of jurisdictions looking in their own backyard to seek to rectify harm while we're waiting on the federal government to step up to the plate and do what they need to be doing. One more thing I want to mention before I go to the next slide is that what we see today, the momentum, again, did not just drop from the sky. It didn't start with Ta-Nehisi Coates and the case for reparations in Atlanta. It didn't start with Nicole Hannah Jones and the 1619 Project and all the work that she has done. It's been long standing. In fact, many people don't realize that much of the mobilization we see today, whether we're talking about in Illinois or whether we're talking about in California, stands on the shoulders of work that was done before the turn of the century, where we, as part of NCOBA, our National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, worked very closely with state and local jurisdictions to get them to pass resolutions, not for reparations. We were very strategic. Again, we're talking about 30 years ago, to pass a resolution in support of HR 40. Again, at that time, the bill was only a bill to study the issue, as the Japanese Americans started out. How could anyone oppose legislation just to study? So it was easy to bring folk on board. They didn't have to actually say, I support reparations and put out a number and a figure or anything along that. They were supporting the concept of a study bill. So all up and down the coast of California, jurisdictions came on board. In Evanston, Illinois, Judge and former Alderman John Baptiste spearheaded the Evanston, Illinois resolution, which supported the John Conyers bill, and all across the country as well. So many places where you see bills now establishing task forces and commissions, it's because 20 years earlier, 25 and 30 years earlier, they introduced resolutions in support. So there are a number of different stakeholders that we have in the reparations field right now. We have Black-led organizations. We have allied organizations. The Japanese American community works very, very closely with the Black reparations movement today, because they know where they got their inspiration from, and they're very vocal in acknowledging that. There are descendant advocacy groups. I talked about Bruce's Beach, but there are many other entities as well that are uncovering abuses in their own backyard, specific things, and are looking for amends and for repair. There are faith-based organizations that have come on board, and some of the larger organizations have pledged amounts, $100,000, or whatever, towards reparations. Academics and lawyers are working on the issues. It's a global movement as well. All across the world, people are talking about the issue of reparations and reparatory justice. So I polled a number of people. It's just, how do you feel when you hear the word in the term reparations? And these are some of the things that people came up with: excited, enraged, inspired, energized, hopeful, connected, grateful, faithful, fire, fellowship, encouraged, confident, hope, blacktastic, energized. Reflect on this as we're coming to a close. 250 years of enslavement, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal, 35 years of state-sanctioned redlining, until we reckon with the compounding moral debts of our ancestors, America will never be whole. That's a quote from Ta-Nehisi Coates' article in The Case for Reparations in the Atlantic magazine. So now I'm going to stop sharing and just open it up for Q&A and discussion. And I want to make it clear, as I always do, that I do not have the answers to everything dealing with reparations. I spent most of my career, before I even had a career, because I started so early, just simply getting people not to be afraid to just say the word reparations. So it's only now, when the issue has become mainstream, whether people agree with it or don't agree with it, it is undeniable that it's kitchen tabletop conversation right now, conversation for the holiday dinner tables, that we are really grappling with the issue of who, what, when, how. Okay, so I'm part of that conversation with you and with everybody else, determining those issues, the who, what, when, and how. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, I've heard this before because I've watched you several times, but I really appreciate the PowerPoint presentation that you organized. Okay, folks, we're open for questions, comments. Nobody has a question.
I do.
Okay, Miss Denise.
Yes. Hello. So in your presentation, you talked about some of the churches that had set aside money for reparations. I'm curious if you know how those funds were distributed and to whom.
Okay, so I might have to come back to you for some of that, but just off the top of my head, the Jesuits have pledged some to be the Jesuits, who basically were the entity within the Catholic Church that sold the 272, I think it was, Black people essentially down the river to Louisiana to save Georgetown University from bankruptcy. Early on, I was involved in the representation of one of the groups of families, and many families that have been uncovered now, who are direct descendants of those original 272 people. And they have organized themselves now to have a say in just how funds or reparations would be distributed. Originally, what Georgetown had done was just put the name of the lead person on the ship's manifest on a building, and that was not sufficient to the descendants. So they are talking about just how they want those monies to go. So I don't have the specifics as to what they're deciding. All this is very, very new. One group of family members, this is why it's so very important to ask the injured parties just what they want. Because one group of folks was just saying, I want my ancestors' graves to be upkept. Of course, that wasn't all they wanted, but that was something that had never even gone into the mind or the thinking of the Jesuits, that could in fact be part of a reparations settlement. The Episcopal Church, dioceses of the Episcopal Church have pledged monies. Again, I don't know how those are being distributed, but there are ongoing conversations with respect to that. Several of the institutions, religious institutions, my brain is just kind of gone dead right now, but have also pledged monies. Yes, if you like, I can get back to you with specifics, but that's just off the top of my head right there.
No, that's very helpful, Dr. Taifa. Thank you. I'm also curious because one of the questions that had come up in different conversations I've had, particularly in Prince George's County, which is a predominantly African American, parts of it are predominantly African American. How do you deal with asking African Americans to pay taxes for reparations for other African Americans?
Well, reparations don't have to come from taxes. There are various creative ways in which a reparations settlement can be effectuated. This is all part of history in the making right now. This is all part of us using our creative minds to think. Upon information and belief, I really have no idea, but upon information and belief, it was my tax dollars that helped to pay reparations to the Japanese Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
That's a good
I mean, I'm just saying, and I had nothing. I wasn't even born during the time of their internment during World War II. So, but be that as it might, there could be other ways in which it can be effectuated. Or some people talked about a tax on the wealthy. I'm not saying I'm for or against. I don't happen to be a destitute person. But I don't think I fall in the category of the wealthy. But these are just nuances here that that must be dealt with. In Evanston, Illinois, they use tax revenue from their newly legal cannabis industry to fund their reparation program, to begin the funding of the reparation program. They have other forms of dollars that they're using now. So tax money is not necessarily the end to all with respect to how reparations will be paid.
Okay, got it.
Excuse me, if you are just speaking of the financial part, remember, reparations can be, I always say that the harms from the enslavement era and beyond were multifaceted. Thus, the remedies can and must be multifaceted as well. A reparations settlement can be fashioned in as many ways as necessary to equitably address the many manifestations of harm. I personally do believe in cash payments, but not only cash payments. I say cash plus. It's so, we can be creative in so many different ways as to just what a reparations package, what I call a settlement. And I call it a settlement because no amount of compensation or amends can ever fully compensate for the dehumanization that was inflicted upon Black people due to the enslavement era and its continuing legacies and vestiges.
Sarah?
Yeah. So I have a question about kind of almost, I don't know if competing claims is the right way, but the tension between Native communities and reparations for formerly enslaved people. That when you look at for the 40 acres and a mule, that you have Andrew Jackson rescinding that order and then perpetrating the Trail of Tears. So you have the land that those 40 acres would be is formerly Native land, and a lot of it unceded Native land. And how does the modern reparations movement address the tension there?
Well, I can't speak for the movement as a whole. I can speak for myself as someone who, it's no secret, if anybody who does any Google of me, I came up during the Black Power era where we talked about land and we talked about the struggles for land and we talked about nation and nation state, but we would always talk about negotiation with the Native peoples of this land. We weren't talking about stealing anybody's land or using the colonialist method of how land was stolen, but it was working in concert with our Native brothers and sisters. And I would submit that that still accrues through to today. One of the things I failed to mention in my presentation, we sometimes we create false narratives and we put up false straw men or whatever with when we talk about competing interests. If there had been true dissemination of history amongst all peoples, it would be understood that all of us, people of color, okay, were oppressed people, are oppressed people, and that we need to be working in tandem as opposed to against each other. After the enslavement era, reparations were paid. They just weren't paid to Black people. They were paid to the former white slaveholders. Land was given. That land, those 40-acre plots of land were given back to white people. The Homestead Act, after that, land was given to white people. It only seems to be when it comes to Black people and reparations, the issue comes up about, well, what about the land from the Native people? Well, what about the land from the Native people of which we are sitting on right now? Okay, where is the compensation for that? Why is it only on when it is now Black people who are talking about reparations that the issue is front and center? All of this land was that land. Okay, so there's a quote, and I don't have it at my fingertips, but one of my mentors, Mario Bedelli, would say, when we talk about the issue of land, he says something to the effect of, we apply to ourselves and believe it also logical, humane, and legally correct for the world to apply to us the same standards that allow the Spaniards and the Mexicans, Jamaicans, or whatever to claim the land that they claim. And he said that all of us and each of us came into the possession of the land as a result of the crime of genocide. But he said, if no one questions the claims of the Jamaicans or the just name any other group of people, no one should question our claim to land as well. So I say that to say nothing is easy with what we're talking about here. We're trying to unravel centuries of oppression and colonialism and genocide, okay? And it's not going to be easy. It is messy, but we should be able to do it in a way and a fashion with brotherly and sisterly love that accrues to the benefit of all freedom-loving people. That was not very articulate or anything along those lines, but it is a passionate issue, and that should not be something that holds us back from forward movement for reparatory justice. Thank you for your question.
Wait a minute, Sarah. We have some other questions and we're running out of time.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Adrian?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr.
After
Taifa.
Adrian, Rima, and if no one else asks Sarah, you can go back to your question, okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, Dr. Taifa, for being here tonight. Really do appreciate your presentation. My question is really around engagement and education methods. We're just starting out on this journey, and I'm curious from you what methods you've seen across the country to really educate and engage all, but particularly youth and young adults, because I think they're the ones that's most likely going to benefit greatly from reparations, and just kind of curious what you're seeing as effective engagement strategies across the country.
Okay, so we are history in the making right here, right now. So what is happening and the proliferation we see is very new and it's very young. But despite it being young and being new, it is really spreading, like I said, across the country like fire. The organization that established as a nonprofit a year ago, Reparation Education Project, seeks to fulfill one of those voids. As I said, philanthropy is becoming very interested in this issue, and they're beginning to fund organizations and groups to do just that, to work in young people, work on college campuses and the like, educating people. But it's not just young people. It's we're in a phase of what I call very, very rapid growth. And with very, very rapid growth, we have to exercise caution. There's a lot of controversy going on there, which you all need to be very much aware of as you proceed along your course. You need to look at what happened and what is happening in California, and make sure that a lot of that doesn't happen in Greenbelt. Look at what's happening in Evanston right now. And a lot of it has to do with there's not been equal education across the board. And there have been other narratives that have surfaced that have served to confuse the issue, shall we say, of reparations. There's a lot of infighting going on. There's a lot of media sensationalism going on. And as we get closer and closer to the elections, we're going to see even more demagoguery. My organization is not the only one doing this. The First Repair, led by Robin Ruth Simmons in Evanston, Illinois, is specifically galvanizing people who are looking at establishing commissions and task forces. They have a convening every year for the past 2 years. I've been at them. There will be another one this year, November 30th through December 2nd, and hopefully you all have seen that material information, and hopefully you will send a representative, one or more there as well, so you can engage with other people. The last thing I'll say, and I'll just say this very quickly, because there's unequal education across the spectrum, my organization, Reparation Education Project, holds what we call a reparations movement monthly meetup on the last Tuesday of each month for education, information, put names to faces, ask questions, share information, and get to know people, because that's one of the best ways to see what's going on. There's a lot going on in allied communities. There's a lot going on in white communities who are looking at issues in their own backyards and seeking to organize other white people to not be scared of this issue and to make them steadfast partners in this movement.
Rima?
Thank you. That was a amazing talk. Appreciate it. I wondered, is reparations like politics local? And how, like, Greenbelt has its own particular history, and there's also being Black, being African American in Greenbelt. How do you parse the local from the general harm? So Greenbelt had a segregating.
Yeah, that's exactly the purpose of legislation, creating task forces and commissions to look in your own backyard to see the specific harms that are generated from policies and practices in your particular jurisdiction, and to come up with recommendations for repair in amends. So it is jurisdiction specific what's happening on the state and local level, as compared with what would happen on the national level, which will look at the country as a whole. It just so happens that the local efforts have taken center stage because the federal effort has languished for decades. So it is my hope that the momentum from the local jurisdictions will spur the federal government to do what it needs to do for the country as a whole. But in the interim, jurisdictions are looking in their own backyard. I'm finding out new things every day, not just about Black people. I just saw a movie. I went to the movies. I rarely do that. And I saw Killers of the Flower Moon. I knew nothing of what was going on in that particular Native community. Okay, during the time when my parents were babies. Okay, I knew nothing. And it was during the same time as what was happening in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the same time as what was happening during the bad summer in 1920, 21, 22, and the like. So there's injury all across the board, and a lot of these things are just being uncovered. It wasn't maybe several years ago when I first found out what happened in Wilmington, North Carolina. I had no clue. The whole legislature was essentially a coup. There was a coup.
It was a coup. It was a coup.
There was a coup. Telling Black folk who were in the legislature, you better get out of town. Leave all your possessions or your belongings, or you will be dead. I mean, it's like, it's just so much that's being uncovered. Yeah, so much being uncovered. And it's incumbent upon these commissions and task forces to do the research, do the history, make sure the younger generation knows about all this, and make recommendations for repair. It's only right and it's only just.
Sarah, did you want to follow up?
Yes, if no one else wants to say anything, I don't want to monopolize.
Didn't see a hand.
Okay, good. So I just wanted to follow up. You talked about the value of having the Black community be in conversation with the Native community in this work. Do you know of any of the groups that are doing this reparations work who've actually facilitated those conversations successfully? And if so, how have they done it?
Honestly, I don't know at this point with respect to the Black community and the Native communities. I do know that there's been a lot of funding in Native communities, and there's beginning to be funding in Black communities. And I think the next step is to bring the two together. Okay, I know more about the collaboration that's been going on with the Japanese American community and Black communities, and with the with white ally communities and Black communities. I cannot speak at all at this point to collaboration with Native communities. That's not to say it's not happening. I'm sure it must be, but I'm thinking now that let's just say things are happening very rapidly. And the fact that Greenbelt legislation includes Native communities, a lot of legislation does not, but Greenbelt in particular does. You all might be a first to help make that come together.
I think we have started reaching out and making connections, and I think that's going to happen. So Sarah will be a first with the Native.
I'm not worried about this at all.
Well, if there are no more questions, I think we all need to give our Dr. Nkechi a big hand clap. And I thank you for coming this evening and sharing so much in your brief history. I think that history is critical and important. Bob, you have your hand up now?
No, I was trying to figure out the clap thing, and I couldn't figure it out. So I'm clapping.
Okay,
and I think Renee, you're clapping too.
I'm clapping.
I think I would strongly recommend that you read Dr. Taifa's book, Reparations Fire, why it's spreading so rapidly, because I think a lot of this information, she has a beautiful chart in the book that shows all 50 states, and it shows who's doing what in those states and who's not doing anything at all, that I think we can all benefit from. And yes, there is a symposium. The symposium is free. I think the commissioners can probably get money for flying and for the airfare and the hotel. We'd have to let them know the cost of that, but the symposium itself, it does not cost.
Also, in my book, Reparations on Fire, I summarize one of the Evanston convenings from a personal viewpoint is in there, just to let you know that too.
Yeah, thank you. So,
okay.
Ladies and gentlemen,
so
this section of our meeting is to a close. Nkechi, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to take leave and grab something to eat now.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, Adrian, it's back.
So I'm actually going to turn it to Denise, since I missed the last meeting, and I know that there's been some discussion about what the items are for this other portion of the meeting. So Denise or Chelsea, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, I can start the meeting. I do want to clarify that this is an open meeting. So the public, if we have public attendees, they are allowed to be here and listen to our discussion. The only topic we have is the consultants who we interviewed and would like to make a decision on. And there are two teams, one from Boston, one from Baltimore. I did share some highlights from the interviews, and I just wanted to review those again, if everyone's okay with that. But first, I want to make sure we have a quorum. Oh, Bob has a good point right now. Do we want to stop the recording? And Renee, do you have a question?
No, my hand's just stuck up. Let me put it down. Sorry.
Yeah, I
No
think
worries.
the recording should be stopped now.
Okay.